Hey guys, Zach here, coming at you with another video. So something people are talking about a lot is if the Nintendo 64 is going to be coming to the Nintendo Switch Online service. Now, this is a question I think is very interesting, but I don't think it's as simple as, oh, I think it's coming. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, stay tuned to find out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, all of that down below. I would really appreciate it. I would love to keep the momentum of my channel going. And yeah, so let's get into today's video.
ZakPak, he's always there for you. ZakPak, only on YouTube. ZakPak, what will he do next? ZakPak, let's find out, 'cause it's on with the show.
Alright, so let's just start off by answering the frickin' question. Do I think that Nintendo 64 is going to be coming to Nintendo Switch Online this year?
How did we, Kronk?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's likely at all, and there's so many reasons why. So before I tell you all the reasons why, I kind of want to dive into the mentality that people have of why they think it is coming this year. Or not even just only Nintendo 64, it could be any console, but, you know, a lot of people are thinking Nintendo 64. Because people are thinking of, oh, in 2018, the NES online service came out. In 2019, the Super Nintendo service came out. So 2020, that means the N64, right? Well, I hate to inform you, but you're probably not on the dot there. Okay, so let's start off with one clarification. Nintendo only promised Nintendo and Super Nintendo games. They said years ago that the Nintendo Switch Online would have Nintendo and Super Nintendo. That's it. That's literally what they said. So, I mean, they just delivered on their promise. They gave us Nintendo, they're giving us Super Nintendo. They delivered on the promise. They don't have to give us any more. Why would they give us more than what they promised us for this service? If anything, we'll probably have to pay more to get N64 games. So, I mean, if you want a yes answer to this question, then expect to pay more for those N64 games. But if you think it's just going to come and be a part of the service, it just doesn't sound likely. They literally said that NES and SNES games were going to be part of the service. Nothing more. And people seem to forget that they said that after the NES games were released. Like, they were like, ooh, I wonder when we're going to get Super Nintendo. And then literally forgot that they only said NES and Super Nintendo. And then when Super Nintendo came out, they were like, ooh, I wonder when N64 is going to come out. I guess, like I said, forgetting that they only said NES and Super Nintendo. So they're really going to be led to disappointment when, you know, when they're not going to get any N64 games. If you still don't believe me, why do you think they're being so slow with these Super Nintendo releases? Why do you think it's not every month? If there's going to be N64 at the end of the year, then yeah, they have quite a few Super Nintendo games to get out in the meantime. You know, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, Donkey Kong Country Trilogy, all of them, you know? There are so many SNES games that they gotta get out in that time, you know, before the N64 games come out. But I think since the September Direct, where they initially launched the 20 SNES games, I think we only got one batch of Super Nintendo games in, what, is that 3-4 months? Like, one batch? It's not that great. Like that's pretty freaking slow. So if that's going to be the standard, where it's every 4 months or so when we're going to get more Super Nintendo games, that's only really 3 bundles of them until the next until the N64 should arrive in September. So it's like, if they're going to do 2 or 3 Super Nintendo games in each bundle, so what? That's, if you're going to do 2 more, because we already had 1, so there's only 2 left, so 6 more SNES games? There's way more than 6 SNES games that should be on the service. Like, it's not right. Like, that just is not right. Like, it doesn't make sense. Does not make sense to me at all. So, that's why I'm debunking that. But also just think about it, right? Nintendo thinks that the NES and SNES games are basically add-ons to the online service, being the online play, the use of the app, that stuff. Nintendo views the retro hardware, the retro software, as add-ons. So we have 2 consoles that we can choose and play games from already. Why would they give us another console, especially one as revolutionary and as big as the Nintendo 64? I just don't see them doing it. One thing people say, you know, when I ask, like, oh, like, why do you think Nintendo is going to do X thing? Like, why do you think that Nintendo is going to do this? The usual answers I get is because it's in tradition for them to, like, you know, like, this is like, you know, they always do something at X time, like a Nintendo Direct, for instance. People are very disappointed there wasn't a Direct this month, or this month being January, because of the fact that Nintendo usually has a Direct in January. Because Nintendo usually has a Direct in January, people were expecting it. Even though in 2019, Nintendo didn't have a Direct in January, so, you know, it's not set in stone. So the fact that NES games and SNES games came out in September of 2018 19 respectively, people are going to be expecting N64 games, or even Game Boy games, or whatever, later this year. This isn't precedent. This is not something Nintendo has to do. This is nowhere near what Nintendo promised. They promised NES and SNES, like I said earlier. So this is not at all like they do not have to do that. Like, that's just, you know, like, that's the reality of it. And another thing that people always point out is that, oh, Nintendo really love us. They want to give us these things. Yes, but this video right here basically explains it all. My Nintendo fanboys video, where I explain Nintendo is a business. If they aren't making money from what they're doing, they're not going to do it. So that makes me question why they're doing this altogether, because they can get way more money for Virtual Console. Like, let's be real here. Like, putting certain games on the eShop for like $5 to $10 each, depending on the console, you know, that would make them way more money. So this is already me scratching my head like, why is this a thing? But to give a whole other console, especially one as grand and revolutionary as the N64 was at the time, it just does not make sense. Like why would they give us games like Mario 64, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Mario Kart 64, Smash Brothers? Why would they give us those games for free in online service? You know, games like Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario World, games that people have played so many times through Virtual Console and through things like that Retro Game Player and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. People have been playing these games for years, you know, like this. N64 is kind of a different picture. N64 is like, ooh, like the novelty of playing Ocarina of Time. Like, there's more novelty for playing a game like Ocarina of Time than there is the original Legend of Zelda. That's just the fact of the matter. Like, there's no debate on that. Like, would you rather go back and play the original Zelda or Ocarina of Time? If you're someone my age or maybe a little bit older, you'd probably say Ocarina of Time. And, you know, no duh. Like, you know, even I would play Ocarina of Time over the original, because the original's an NES game. It's simple, you know? Now, I get it, you know, some people have that nostalgia for the NES, but that's most people who grew up with that generation. Now, of course, same thing for people like me, who grew up with the N64 and the GameCube. Like, that's my generation, so of course I have bias and favoritism towards that. But I can already tell you that with the NES and SNES, that's been done so many times. So even people of the older generations who have that more nostalgia for those generations have played those games enough times on the Wii, on the Wii U, on the 3DS, now on the Switch, to where it's like, alright, we really want to see the N64 expanded, or now the GameCube make the entrance into Virtual Console. We want to see those kinds of games make it to these systems, because they really never, I mean, N64 has been, yeah, but not to the extent of having a full, beefy library of N64 games to choose from. Like, I don't know. I just think people who say that Nintendo's going to give us N64 games this year because Nintendo loves us, or they've been, you know, releasing new consoles for their online service every single year, they're not seeing the bigger picture. That, firstly, that Nintendo stated that they were going to give us NES and SNES games, period, done. That's all they said they were going to do. B, that they are giving us these games as an extra for the service. So why would they give us another free console of bigger games, like I said, like Ocarina of Time and Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 and Mario Party? Why would they give us all those titles for free under the service? Doesn't make sense. Like, look at what happened with the N64 Mini, right? No one's talking about that anymore. It was so big that, like, you know, once the Super Nintendo Mini came out, everyone's like, oh my god, the N64 Mini must be right around the corner. And in PlayStation, they made a mini console. Granted, the PS1 is less powerful than the N64, so it's a little bit easier, but regardless, You know, so now people completely forgot about the N64 Mini. Where'd that go? What happened to that? Everyone just completely forgot about that. Like, you know, like you can't say Nintendo's going to do things because it makes sense for them to do things. Because it may make sense for them to make an N64 Mini right after the Super Nintendo Mini, but what is this, like 2 years later, nearly 3 years later, and there's still no N64 Mini? Like, you know, there's no such thing as tradition and, you know, stuff when it comes to Nintendo. Of course, you can always expect a Direct in June because of E3, you know, and you can expect a Direct early in the year and a Direct later in the year, aka January, February, March, or August, September, October, because that's when they usually do it. But you can't say, like, oh, Nintendo's going to have N64 games because they've had SNES and NES the past 2 years in September. No, you can't do that. You know, you can't predict business decisions. Markets change. Values of things change. So it just does not make sense for me, or it does not make sense to me that this is what they do. Just it's unrealistic. All right, you guys, so what do you think? Do you guys think they're going to get N64 games this year on the NSO, Nintendo Switch Online? I don't think so. I highly doubt it. I'll be pleasantly surprised if there is. I mean, hey, if there is, hey, free games. But if there are N64 games on Nintendo Switch Online, I think they're going to cost extra. You know, maybe an extra $10 a year. So you have to pay $30 a year to also get N64 games. I just don't see them doing it for free. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.